Hey everybody, welcome back to Kate's Comics, and welcome back to take 3 of trying to record this video. The first time I recorded, spoke for 20 minutes and realised the camera had not been recording at all, and on the second time, halfway through recording, the SD card is full. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, this one goes to plan and this all comes out okay. And I hope that this is the one. This is the one. So today I've got a very exciting video I'm very excited to make. Bloomsbury Publishing recently reached out to me and said, Cade, would you like to have an advanced copy of some books to read and review? And I said, yes please, I would really like that. And they reached out to me because they are partnering with Marvel in the month of November 2025 for the Marvel Age of Comics, where they have individual books that focus on specific characters, specific decades of Marvel history, genres, how stories impacted society and how these characters were then portrayed or how they've changed over the years. Let me show you the books that I was sent. We have these 3. Daredevil Born Again by Chris Ryall, The Mighty Avengers versus the 1970s by Paul Cornell, and Doctor Strange, A Decade of Dark Magic by Stuart. This video is going to come out on Wednesday. That is Wednesday the 12th of November, I believe. All of these books release on November 13th, 2025. So if you're watching this video the day that it comes out, all of these books release tomorrow. And if you're watching it a couple days later, all of these books are out right now. You can check out a link down in the description below to go and check them out if you want to. It's not an affiliate link, nothing like that. I don't earn any money from it. It's just a very nice thing that Bloomsbury Publishing did, sending me these books. And so I want to support them in any way that I can. And I'll leave a link down in the description below so you can go and check these out if there are any books here that really catch your fancy and you think, yeah, I want to give that a read. I believe they're all the same price. So individually, the paperbacks cost £10.99, the ebooks cost £9.89, and the audiobooks cost £7.50. That is the same across all 3, and I think that's just going to be the same price going forwards. I don't think there's going to be one book that's going to be any more than the others. At least I've not been made aware of that. Pretty good for £10.99. Very nice quality book. It's quite small, like fits in your hand nicely. I was reading this to and from work on the tube. I was reading this in my spare time, just sat chilling. It's nice to not have like a big omnibus lying on your knees or on the table where you've got to sit at your desk and read it. So it's really convenient to just sit and read them anywhere, really. This one in particular, I read in one sitting in the living room with a cup of tea and just really enjoyed it. Something that these books all have in common is that you can really tell that the writers are fans of comics. And if you read the About the Authors page at the back of the book, that's what it says. It says they've all been fans of comics. It says that they've written comics. It says they've written scripts, TV shows, movies based on comics. And that really comes across in the stories. It doesn't feel like it's somebody just cashing it in, somebody that's just doing a job writing about a specific story. It feels like these are stories that these people have grown up with, that they've got a real connection to. The one for me that really stood out was Chris Ryall, Daredevil Born Again in particular. So this is a deep dive into Daredevil Born Again, written by Frank Miller with art by David Mazzucchelli. The whole time I was reading that, I was reading it as Machiavelli, so I was like really trying to read it as how it's written, but my brain was just like Machiavelli. I want to start this with the last sentence or the last paragraph that Chris Ryall writes. The storyline's name is Daredevil Born Again. It was created, written and drawn by Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli. It's waiting to be revisited again and again. It will provide a rewarding reading experience each time you do so. That is all you need to know. So I haven't watched any Daredevil other than the Ben Affleck early 2000s film, and I haven't watched Charlie Cox's Netflix Daredevil. I haven't watched the Disney Plus Daredevil Born Again. And after reading this, I'm definitely going to go away and check them out. I did buy Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil Omnibus Volume 1 because I wanted to read the character and because I really enjoyed Chip Zdarsky's writing on Spider-Man. I was hoping it would be a similar sort of vibe. I really want to read Born Again now. I think something that Chris Ryall does so well in this book is make you want to read it. If you like me and you haven't read it, it doesn't feel impenetrable. It feels like it's very new reader friendly. It very much helps you to understand what's going on in the book and explains why what's going on is impactful for the character. He looks at the character's backstory, he looks at Matt Murdock's previous relationships, he looks at the future of Daredevil after this, and he also looks at the wider world at the time. And I sort of felt a bit like, am I going to enjoy a deep dive on a book I've not read? And I did. I really enjoyed it. I think if you're a fan of Daredevil, or even if you're just a more well-read comic fan than me, and you have read Daredevil Born Again, I think you'll really get a lot from this. Something that was really apparent throughout was Chris Ryall's just appreciation of the character and his enjoyment of the story and of the character. It really comes across that he's a comic fan, as I mentioned, as it does with all of these books. But I think this one in particular, I think out of the three, this was my favourite. Yeah, it just really made me want to go and check out the story in the book. So, things that I've written down when I was reading this book, because I didn't want to script this video too much, because I feel like when I do that, I become a bit of a robot. So I made notes on things that we could talk about. The first main thing that really jumped out to me in this book, and when I was reading all of the books, is that they don't shy away from mentioning DC. And I think that's a really good thing, because you're talking about these characters and how people are perceiving them. You have to mention, or you have to at least acknowledge, that DC are the equivalent of popularity at the time and still today. There are certain people that love both Marvel and DC. There are certain people that will only read DC or only read Marvel. And I think something that all of these books do very well is they don't hide, they don't try and glorify, this is just Marvel, we're just going to talk about this. They mention DC, they mention other aspects from DC. I learned more in this about Jack Kirby leaving Marvel and going to write for DC than I knew before. And that was something I wasn't expecting to learn reading these. They talk about everything in the story, from the framing of the panels, to the characters, to the motivations, to the messages, the themes, especially this one in Daredevil Born Again. The only thing that I got from this that I wish could have been included was the colour. So they have the panels from the comic, but they don't have them in colour. Just because there are times throughout the book, with the Daredevil one in particular, they mention Kingpin looking out over the city and the reds and the pinks of the sky, and you're looking at a black and white photo. So that was my only sort of, I guess not even gripe, but just like the only thing I would have liked to have been different. So for me, the Daredevil Born Again one, really interesting, really made me want to go and read Daredevil. I really enjoyed it, and I want to go and check out more Daredevil. I've never read any Daredevil, so if you guys have any places to start down in the comments below, please let me know. I'd like to read Frank Miller's Daredevil. I'd like to read, obviously, Chip Zdarsky's one. I think, is it? Yeah, you can see it here just behind me. And there's a volume 2 of that one as well, so I'll definitely check that out. And just before we move on to the Avengers versus the 1970s, something I really enjoyed about this was that it didn't just end when the story ended. In chapter 6 of this book, you then go on to talk about the sales of this book, the impact that it had, and the popularity. And that was something that I really found to be a key part of this. If they just talked about it and then like, right, and then it ends, that's it, thank you for reading this, it would have felt like kind of a very abrupt finish. So to then go on and see the wider ramifications of that, of the story, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was good. Then moving on to the Avengers versus the 1970s. This goes through all the writers for the Avengers, and it talks about Roy Thomas, Steve Englehart, David Michelinie, Jim Shooter, Mark Grindelwald, Stephen Grant, Roger Stern. It talks about the years that they were writing for the Avengers. I don't know how well you can see that there. Can't actually see it at all. Talks about the years that they were active and how they all started to write. So for me, someone that likes that kind of stuff, and if you've watched the channel for a while, you know I used to do the Beyond the Page series where we looked at popular comic book writers, artists, creators, how they got to start in comics. So to just have that little bit in there and see like Roy Thomas started writing comics because of X, Y, and Z. He was assisting Stan Lee, and then he became the editor-in-chief, and then like it's very interesting to me, and it adds a lot of background. I think that Paul Cornell does a good job of explaining what's going on in the world at the time and how each writer sort of varied their take on the Avengers. Yes, there are a lot of play-by-play of what's happening, but I think that's kind of needed. There are times where it's happening and I sort of found myself just reading what was happening without actually seeing any of it. I couldn't see any of the panels, obviously, because it's not a graphic novel, and I was just sort of being told, right, well, Hulk is there from the start, then he leaves, Captain America comes, then Scarlet Witch and Hawkeye, and then da-da-da-da. But I think for the issues that he talks about in this book, that is needed, because the first 2 chapters discuss the relation to women's rights and race. And the things that I think stood out to me the most in this were seeing the development of female characters and how they go from being characters that need to be saved by the men to being standalone characters. Like it talks about Scarlet Witch as a character and how she became more powerful and more of a well-rounded character than just being objectified. And then seeing other issues like the racial issues that were going on at the time, especially in relation to the Black Panther. Reading about how Roy Thomas said we should maybe change the name of the Black Panther to the Black Leopard because of the Black Panther Party, and then seeing about how that was changed back pretty much immediately. I mean, I didn't know about that. Having the wider issues of things like that, I enjoyed reading about them. I just wish maybe there'd been a bit more of an exploration on certain things like that. Later on in the book as well, they talk about the Falcon and how he was introduced to the Avengers. I found that whole section to be quite interesting in relation to the racial issues at the time, and seeing about how this black superhero was then like part of the team. They say in the book about how they champion diversity. The X-Men have always been an allegory for race, but you have the Vision, who's an android, you have Scarlet Witch, you have the Falcon, you have all these characters from different walks of life who are completely different, all teaming up together. So yeah, the 1970s, I really enjoyed reading about, and yeah, I would love to go and check out more. And then finally we move on to Doctor Strange, A Decade of Dark Magic. There we go, by Stuart Moore. Read this one today, finished it today. Doctor Strange is a character I've never read before and haven't really had any exposure to other than the Marvel films and the MCU. I really enjoyed this book. It made me want to go and check out some classic Doctor Strange, but also some like modern Doctor Strange. So this chronicles Doctor Strange's early years in the 1960s and about how he started in Strange Adventures, or Strange Tales 110 I think it is, and then goes through and ends up in Doctor Strange #1. And so just like with the Avengers in the 1970s, you've got 1963 all the way to 1973. And in this, you have sort of a play-by-play of what's happening with Dormammu, with Clea, with Baron Mordo, and at times it does feel like a play-by-play of just what's happening, similar to the 1970s Avengers, but I feel like that's kind of what you're going to get when you're looking at a whole decade. It's very difficult to not have to give a play-by-play because you've got to keep the reader in the know. It was good at giving a backstory to that and giving a backstory to Stan Lee and Steve Ditko's writing and art on Doctor Strange. Especially starting off, it explains how the first Doctor Strange book, or the first appearance of Doctor Strange, you have just these 9 panels and it was just 3x3, and then every so often there'd be like 2 panels crushed together. It'd be like a really small splash page. And I think, I can't remember exactly the quote, but it says, Stuart Moore writes, it's like a Salvador Dali painting on post-it notes, because it was just so intricate. Yeah, I think just like with the Mighty Avengers versus the 1970s, it talks a lot about, you know, the wider world at the time. It talks about how pre-1970 New York, if you didn't live there and you hadn't experienced it, you couldn't really write it, or you didn't have an understanding about it to be able to write it. It talks about the smog in the air and the Clean Air Act, and about how before that, New York, the air was, you know, just polluted, and about how the bin men used to come with the metal trash cans and like throw them around in the street when they were clearing up the rubbish. And it talks about one bit about how a building was blown up. All of these things, and about how New York at the time where Doctor Strange lives, a sorcerer took down a little back alley very well could have just been a thing, because there was all these like characters and all this stuff going on in 1960s New York. So I think something these books do very well is give context to the time and the era. Reading this, I didn't ever feel like, well, I've got to go and Google that and see what's happening. Just have a basic knowledge and understanding to be able to read the book. I didn't feel lost at times. These 2 books in particular, Doctor Strange and the Mighty Avengers versus the 1970s, very good for giving context to the wider world at the time. That's not to say the Daredevil Born Again isn't, but this is much more just an exploration into one story. I really enjoyed all 3 of these books, and the 4th one to be released, I believe, is Spider-Man, and looking at how Miles Morales reinvented the character of Spider-Man. I would very much like to read that. I'm gonna definitely check that out myself, and I'm definitely gonna give that a read and maybe review it on the channel. I would suggest reading these books. I think if you're a fan of comics, you're gonna like these books. I think even if you're not a fan of comics, you still can get something from these books. Yeah, you might not necessarily want to read a deep dive into one specific story, but if you've just got an interest in the 1970s and about how the Avengers existed in the 1970s, then you might find that really interesting. My girlfriend doesn't read comics at all. I think she'd quite like to read about the Avengers in the 1970s, but we'll see. So yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. If anyone is still watching, I hope you are, and I hope you enjoyed. Let me know down in the comments below once these books are out if you do go and check them out and what you think of them. I would love to know. And once again, thank you so much, Bloomsbury, for sending me these books. You really didn't have to do that, and I just really appreciate it. It's really nice of you, so thank you. And thanks, Chris, if you're watching this. Yeah, thank you so much. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks, guys. Bye.